The world doesn't care about your feelings. It will break you, chew you up, and spit you out, unless you forge a mind of iron. Today, we reveal 8 brutal Stoic laws. They aren't comfortable, they aren't nice, but they will make you mentally unbreakable. Listen closely. We live in an era of unprecedented comfort, yet we have never been more fragile. We shatter at the slightest insult, crumble under minor financial stress, and fall apart when the universe does not hand us exactly what we desire. We have forgotten that the human mind was not designed to recline on a bed of roses. It was designed to be forged in the brutal, unrelenting fires of adversity. Stoicism is not a self-help gimmick. It is not a collection of flowery quotes to post on social media. It is an ancient, martial philosophy, a psychological weapon developed by slaves, gladiators, and emperors to survive in a world that was infinitely more violent, unpredictable, and ruthless than our own. If you want to become mentally unbreakable, you must stop seeking comfort and start seeking the fire. You must rewire your brain using the same brutal laws that guided the titans of the ancient world. Law 1. The law of radical acceptance. Amor fati. The first law is the hardest to swallow. It is the law of amor fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of fate. Most people operate under the delusion that life is supposed to be fair. When tragedy strikes, when they lose a job, when a partner betrays them, or when illness ravages their body, their first reaction is resistance. They cry out, "Why me? This isn't fair. This wasn't supposed to happen." This resistance, this agonizing gap between what you want reality to be and what reality actually is the birthplace of all human misery. The Stoic does not simply tolerate fate. The Stoic embraces it. Consider the story of Epictetus. He was not born into wealth or power. He was born a slave in the Roman Empire. His master, Epictetus, was known to be cruel and sadistic. According to historical accounts, one day, in a fit of rage, Epictetus began twisting Epictetus's leg. As the pressure mounted and the bone began to bow, Epictetus did not scream. He did not beg for mercy. He looked calmly at his master and said, "You are going to break my leg." A moment later, the bone snapped with a sickening crack. Epictetus would be crippled for the rest of his life. Looking at his ruined limb, he simply said, "I told you it would break." This is a brutal story, but it illustrates a terrifyingly powerful mindset. Epictetus understood that his physical body was the property of a tyrant, but his mind belonged entirely to himself. He could not control the breaking of his leg, but he could control his response to it. He refused to be a victim. He accepted his fate so radically that he later wrote, "Do not demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well." To rewire your mind, you must kill the victim inside you. When you face a brutal setback, do not ask the universe for an apology. Do not complain. Say, "Good. The project failed? Good. A chance to learn why and rebuild it stronger. You were betrayed? Good. The mask has fallen, and you now know who your real friends are. You are injured? Good. Time to train your mind while your body heals. Amor fati means recognizing that the fire that burns you is the same fire that forges you. Every obstacle is fuel. Throw it into the furnace of your mind and let it burn. Law 2. The law of willful suffering, voluntary discomfort. The modern world has engineered suffering out of daily existence. We control the temperature in our homes with a dial. We can summon highly caloric food to our doorstep with the tap of a glowing screen. We are insulated from the harshness of nature. Yet, this total eradication of discomfort has made us soft. We have lost our tolerance for pain, which means when involuntary suffering inevitably arrives, it destroys us. The second brutal law of Stoicism is the practice of voluntary discomfort. If you want to be unbreakable in the storm, you must practice standing in the rain. Seneca the Younger was one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire. He had sprawling estates, legions of servants, and unimaginable political power as the advisor to the Emperor Nero. Yet, Seneca knew that wealth was a trap. He knew that the moment you become dependent on comfort, you become a hostage to fortune. If you fear losing your soft bed, you can be controlled. To immunize himself against the fear of loss, Seneca would regularly abandon his opulent lifestyle. For days at a time, he would dress in the coarse, scratchy clothing of a beggar. He would eat nothing but stale bread and drink only room-temperature water. He would sleep on the hard dirt floor. He did this not as a punishment, but as an inoculation. After a few days of living like the poorest man in Rome, he would look at his meager surroundings and ask himself, "Is this the condition that I so feared?" By voluntarily exposing himself to poverty, Seneca stripped the universe of its power to threaten him. He realized that the human body requires very little to survive, and that the terror of poverty is almost entirely psychological. You must integrate this brutality into your own life. Stop taking the path of least resistance. Take freezing cold showers in the dead of winter to teach your nervous system that you, not your reflexes, are in control. Fast for 24 hours to realize that the sensation of hunger is just a feeling, not a fatal emergency. Sleep on the floor once a month. Lift heavy, unforgiving weights until your muscles scream for mercy, and then lift them again. When you deliberately subject yourself to hardship on your own terms, you build a callus over your mind. When the economy crashes, when you lose your status, or when the modern comforts you rely on are suddenly stripped away, you will not panic. You will simply smile and say, "I have been here before." If part 1 is about interacting with the physical world, part 2 is about retreating into the mental fortress. The Stoics referred to the mind as the inner citadel. It is an impenetrable fortress that no invading army, no toxic individual, and no stroke of bad luck can breach, unless you unlock the gates from the inside and let them in. Law 3, the law of emotional detachment, the dichotomy of control. The third law is the ultimate filter for human anxiety. It is the razor blade that cuts away 90% of your daily stress. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control. There are things in this world you control and things you do not. You control your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, your work ethic, and your character. You do not control the economy, the weather, the opinions of others, the past, the future, or the inevitable decay of your physical body. Most people spend their entire lives bleeding their energy dry by obsessing over the second category. They rage at the traffic. They agonize over what their co-workers think of them. They panic over the news cycle. They are trying to steer a ship by yelling at the ocean. It is an exercise in utter futility. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Rome, understood this law better than anyone. He was the most powerful man on the planet, yet his reign was defined by relentless catastrophe. He faced the Antonine Plague, a horrific pandemic that wiped out millions of Romans and left corpses piled in the streets. He faced endless bloody wars against Germanic tribes on the frozen northern frontiers. He faced the betrayal of his most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, who started a civil war to steal the throne. Through all of this unimaginable stress, Marcus Aurelius maintained profound psychological tranquility. How? Because he ruthlessly applied the dichotomy of control. When the plague ravaged his empire, he didn't panic. He did what was in his control. He emptied the imperial treasury to help the sick. He passed laws to bury the dead, and he managed the logistics of the state. The death toll itself, out of his control. Therefore, out of his mind. When his trusted friend Avidius Cassius betrayed him, Marcus did not fly into a vengeful rage. The betrayal was an external event, outside of his control. He addressed his troops, told them they would march to handle the rebellion, but specifically ordered them not to kill Cassius. He wanted to capture him alive so he could demonstrate the ultimate act of philosophical superiority, forgiveness. Cassius was later assassinated by his own men before Marcus could reach him. To become mentally unbreakable, you must build this inner citadel. When a crisis hits, draw a brutal, unyielding line in the sand. Ask yourself, is this within my complete control? If the answer is no, drop it immediately. Let it fall to the ground. It is none of your business. Your only business is how you react. If someone insults you, they are handing you a psychological poison. You do not have to drink it. Their words are air vibrating in the atmosphere. They have no power over your inner citadel, unless you willingly open the gates and let the insult tear you apart. Detach. Observe the external world like a scientist observing an experiment. Be engaged, be effective, but remain entirely untouched at your core. Law 4. The law of the final deadline, memento mori. The fourth law is terrifying to the weak, but profoundly liberating to the strong. Memento mori. Remember that you must die. We live in a state of mass delusion. We walk through our days, acting as though we have an infinite supply of tomorrows. We put off our ambitions. We delay telling our loved ones how we feel. We tolerate toxic relationships, and we waste hours scrolling through digital garbage because we implicitly believe the clock will never run out. The Stoics recognized that this delusion is the greatest thief of human potential. Seneca wrote fiercely on the shortness of life, pointing out that life is not short. We simply waste too much of it. He noted a brutal truth about time. We are terrified of losing our money, our property, and our status, yet we give away our time, the only non-renewable resource in the universe, to anyone who asks for it. More importantly, Seneca shifted the paradigm of how we view death. We think of death as a mysterious event lurking in the distant future. But Seneca argued that death is happening right now. Every second that passes belongs to death. The years behind you, death owns them. The hour you spent this morning, death has already claimed it. You are dying every single day. When you truly internalize memento mori, it acts as a brutal psychological cattle prod. It shocks you awake. If you knew with absolute certainty that you were going to drop dead in 365 days, how would you live today? Would you spend 3 hours arguing with a stranger on the internet? Would you stay in a job that crushes your soul? Would you care even a little bit about the judgment of people you don't even respect? No, you would become fiercely protective of your energy. You would act with violent urgency. To rewire your mind, you must keep death at your side. It is not morbid. It is the ultimate source of clarity. Let the awareness of your own mortality strip away the trivial nonsense that clutters your mind. Let it give you the courage to take massive risks, because the worst-case scenario is that you end up exactly where we are all going anyway, 6 feet underground. Use death as your ultimate deadline. It is the only thing guaranteed in this universe. Let the ticking clock force you to build your legacy right now, today, in this very moment, before the hourglass empties forever. By now, you have learned to love your fate. Seek out the hard path. Fortify your mind against external chaos, and use death as your driving force. But an unbreakable mind must be anchored to something heavier than mere survival tactics. It must be anchored to character. In the Stoic framework, character is fate. If your character is weak, your life will be a tragedy. If your character is ironclad, you can walk through hell with a smile. Law 5. The law of radical ownership. No victimhood. We live in an age that glorifies victimhood. If you fail, society offers you a menu of excuses. It was your upbringing, it was the economy, it was systemic unfairness, it was your genetics. The modern world rewards people for finding someone else to blame for their misery. The 5th brutal law of Stoicism annihilates this mindset. You, and you alone, are completely responsible for the state of your mind and the quality of your life. Taking radical ownership does not mean that bad things don't happen to you. It does not mean that the system is fair or that other people haven't wronged you. It means that regardless of whose fault the situation is, it is your responsibility to deal with it. Consider the legendary Stoic figure, Cato the Younger. Cato was a Roman senator, renowned for his terrifying, unbending moral integrity. He was the arch-rival of Julius Caesar. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon and sparked a massive civil war to destroy the Roman Republic and install himself as a dictator, Cato did not sit back and complain about the unfairness of politics. He did not play the victim, even when it became clear that Caesar's military genius was unstoppable. Following a crushing defeat, Cato led the remnants of the Republican army on a brutal, agonizing march through the scorching deserts of North Africa. The conditions were horrific. Men were dying of thirst, heat stroke, and venomous snake bites. Throughout this hellish journey, Cato refused to ride on a horse. He marched on foot in the burning sand, just like the lowest-ranking foot soldier. When the army finally found a meager puddle of muddy water, the soldiers scooped some up in a helmet and offered it to Cato first. Cato looked at his parched, dying men. He took the helmet, turned it upside down, and poured the water into the sand. By taking radical ownership of his position as a leader, Cato communicated a brutal message. We suffer together, or not at all. I am not exempt. He refused to be a victim of the desert, just as he refused to be a victim of Caesar. When Caesar finally cornered him at the city of Utica, Caesar planned to pardon Cato to show his own mercy. Cato refused to give the tyrant the satisfaction. Rather than live under the rule of a dictator and compromise his ironclad principles, Cato took his own sword and ended his life. While modern philosophy does not advocate for this end, Cato's absolute refusal to bend his will to an external force made him a godlike figure in Stoic history. Your life is your fault. If you are out of shape, it is your fault. If you are broke, it is your fault. If you are stuck in a miserable relationship, it is your fault. Even if someone betrayed you, it was your responsibility to vet them, and it is your responsibility to heal from it. The moment you blame external circumstances, you hand over your power. You give the remote control of your emotions to the universe. Reclaim it. Look in the mirror and say, everything wrong in my life is on me, which means I am the only one with the power to fix it. This level of accountability is crushing at first, but once you accept it, it is the most liberating force on earth. It makes you a god of your own microscopic universe. Law 6, the law of ruthless essentialism. Eliminate the unnecessary. The human mind was not built to process the volume of information, drama, and artificial urgency we face today. You are bombarded by thousands of advertisements, notifications, emails, and news alerts every single day. Your attention is being strip-mined by algorithms designed by neuroscientists to keep you addicted to outrage and cheap dopamine. A fractured mind is a weak mind. The 6th law is ruthless essentialism. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Most of what we say and do is not essential. If you can eliminate it, you will have more time and more tranquility. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" This is a brutal law because it requires you to slaughter your darlings. It requires you to look at your daily habits, your social circle, and your obligations with the cold, dead eyes of an executioner. We fill our lives with noise to avoid facing the deafening silence of our own thoughts. We attend social events we hate to impress people we don't care about. We engage in arguments on social media to defend an ego that doesn't actually exist. We buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to project a status that no one respects. To rewire your mind for unbreakable strength, you must undergo a brutal purging process. You must become a minimalist of the mind. Start with your attention. Unfollow everyone on social media who does not educate you, inspire you, or directly improve your life. Turn off every push notification on your phone. If it is an emergency, someone will call you. Next, purge your relationships. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If your inner circle consists of complainers, gossips, and victims, they are actively infecting your inner citadel with their weakness. You must cut them off. It will be painful. It will be awkward. They will call you arrogant. Let them. You are building an empire in your mind, and you cannot build a castle using rotten bricks. Finally, purge your desires. The Stoics understood that the quickest way to wealth and peace is not to acquire more things, but to desire fewer things. Look at your ambitions. Are they truly yours? Or did society implant them in your brain? Strip away everything that is not absolutely essential to your core mission. When you eliminate the non-essential, you consolidate your power. A laser can cut through solid steel, not because it is a massive amount of light, but because all of its light is focused on a single, microscopic point. When you stop scattering your energy across 100 meaningless distractions, your mind becomes a laser. You become terrifyingly focused, unshakable, unbreakable. You have ruthlessly stripped away the non-essential from your life. You have painstakingly built an impenetrable inner citadel. You have learned to love the brutal twists of your fate, and you have placed the relentlessly ticking clock of your own mortality squarely on your desk. But hear this clearly. A philosophy that exists solely within the confines of your own head is a completely worthless philosophy. The modern world is deeply infected with a crippling psychological disease. It is the illusion that thinking about a thing, planning a thing, or reading about a thing is the exact same as actually doing the thing. We consume endless libraries of self-improvement books. We listen to hundreds of hours of podcasts on optimization. We color-code our digital calendars, and we build elaborate, multi-step plans for our future empires. Yet, despite all of this frantic mental masturbation, our physical lives remain completely, paralyzingly unchanged. We are drowning in preparation, while starving for execution. The ancient Stoics harbored a deep, visceral disgust for theoretical philosophy. To them, the mind was not a museum meant to display clever ideas. It was an armory meant to forge weapons for the real world. If your profound beliefs and quotes did not manifest in the bloody, muddy reality of your physical daily actions, you were not a philosopher. You were a fraud. The unbreakable mind is never built in the comfortable silence of a library. It is hammered into existence on the unforgiving battlefield of daily execution. Law 7. The law of merciless execution. Action is the only truth. The 7th brutal law is the law of merciless execution. It dictates a truth that most modern people are too weak to hear. Motivation is a fabricated myth. Waiting for the right time is the ultimate coward's excuse, and your value as a human being is defined exclusively by what you force yourself to do when you absolutely do not feel like doing it. Society has brainwashed us into believing a dangerous lie. We have been taught that we must wait to feel inspired, energized, or fully motivated before we can take meaningful action. We wait for a divine spark. We wait for the stars to perfectly align. We wait to feel ready. The unbreakable Stoic understands a terrifying reality. You will never feel fully ready. Motivation is a fleeting, deeply unreliable neurochemical illusion. It is entirely dictated by arbitrary variables. How well you slept last night, the fluctuation of your blood sugar, the amount of caffeine in your bloodstream, or whether the sun is shining outside. If you attempt to build your life, your business, or your physical body on the foundation of motivation, you are building a heavy stone castle on wet sand. It will collapse the moment a storm arrives. Instead of chasing the ghost of motivation, the unbreakable mind relies on cold, mechanical, merciless discipline. It relies on the concept of duty. To understand this, look to Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of the known world, commanding legions of men and vast treasuries of gold. If anyone had the right to seek comfort, it was him. In his later years, Marcus was physically frail. He suffered from chronic, agonizing chest pains and bleeding stomach ulcers. While commanding troops on the freezing, mud-soaked frontiers of Germania, surrounded by hostile barbarian tribes, he slept in freezing tents. He had a kingdom of servants who would have eagerly catered to his every whim, brought him warm wine, and allowed him to rest in silk sheets. Yet, in his private journal, written by candlelight in the freezing cold, he penned one of the most brutal condemnations of human laziness ever recorded. He was not lecturing others. He was ruthlessly attacking his own weakness. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm?'" When his exhausted, aching physical body argued back, whining, "But it's nicer here," Marcus took a philosophical sword and ruthlessly cut down his own self-pity. He responded, "So you were born to feel nice, instead of doing things and experiencing them? Don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants and spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being? Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands?" This is the terrifying mindset of an absolute sovereign who ruled over millions, yet demanded that he treat himself like a lowly foot soldier. He understood a fundamental law of the universe. Execution does not require you to enjoy the process. It simply requires you to move. If you want a masterclass in the brutality of execution, consider the story of Cleanthes, who would eventually become the second head of the Stoic school in Athens. Cleanthes was not born into an aristocratic family of thinkers. He arrived in the intellectual capital of the world as a penniless, battered former boxer. His face was scarred, his body was broken, and he had nothing but the ragged clothes on his back. He possessed a burning desire to study philosophy under the great master Zeno, but he had absolutely no money to pay for basic food, let alone shelter or tuition. Did Cleanthes complain about systemic unfairness? Did he beg on the streets? Did he wait for a wealthy patron to sponsor his intellectual journey? No. He executed. Cleanthes went to work in the dead of night, while the wealthy elite of Athens slept comfortably in their villas. This massive, scarred ex-boxer would walk to the public wells and haul impossibly heavy clay buckets of water for miles to irrigate the sprawling gardens of the rich. When he wasn't hauling water, he was in the bakeries, crushing heavy grain by hand with massive grinding stones. He performed the most grueling, back-breaking, humiliating manual labor imaginable in complete darkness and freezing temperatures, just so he could earn a handful of copper coins to survive. Then, when the sun finally came up, his muscles screaming in agony and his hands blistered and bleeding, he would wash the mud off his face, walk to the Stoa Poikile, and stand quietly in the back to study the complex nature of the cosmos, virtue, and logic under Zeno. He did not do this for a week as a temporary struggle. He did not do this for a month. He executed this brutal, exhausting double life for 19 years. The wealthy, soft-handed students mocked him mercilessly. They laughed at his shabby, torn clothing and his peasant labor. They sneeringly called him the water carrier. Cleanthes did not care. He did not argue with them or try to defend his honor. He responded with absolute, chilling silence and pure execution. He knew that the dirt under his fingernails and the agony in his back were the price of the iron he was forging in his mind. Eventually, his staggering, inhuman discipline and his undeniable philosophical brilliance completely outshone every single wealthy aristocrat in the academy. Upon Zeno's death, this former penniless water carrier became the undisputed leader of the entire Stoic movement. To rewire your mind and become mentally unbreakable, you must adopt this exact same merciless brutality toward your own excuses. You must take a blade and sever the connection between your feelings and your actions. When your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and the seductive, weak voice in your head begs you for just 10 more minutes of sleep, you do not negotiate with it. You do not reason with it. You treat that voice like a mortal enemy attempting to assassinate your potential. You throw the covers off, put your feet on the cold floor, and you stand up. When you sit down to do the hard work, and a wave of overwhelming anxiety hits you, you do not reach for your phone for a quick hit of digital dopamine. You do not open a new tab to distract yourself. You stare at the blinking cursor. You embrace the agonizing misery of the resistance, and you force your hands to start typing. The true Stoic does not care if the tools are broken. The Stoic does not care if the economy is crashing. The Stoic does not care if their heart is shattered into 1,000 pieces. The duty remains. Execution is the only truth in this universe. Stop preparing. Stop planning. Stop talking to your friends about the powerful, disciplined person you are trying to become, and simply be that person right now in this exact microscopic moment in time. Action is not just a part of the process. Action is the heavy steel anvil upon which the unbreakable mind is forged. Strike it. You have forged a mind that can withstand external chaos, physical pain, and the gravitational pull of your own laziness. You are disciplined, focused, and relentless. But there is one final boss to defeat. There is one invisible enemy that destroys more empires, ruins more relationships, and shatters more minds than any plague or army in human history. That enemy lives inside you. It is your own ego. If you build a fortress of discipline, but leave the ego intact, you are simply building a highly efficient machine fueled by fragility. A man with a massive ego is the easiest target in the world. All it takes to destroy him is a disrespectful comment from a stranger, a perceived slight from a colleague, or a failure that exposes his flaws to the public. If your identity is tied to how important you think you are, you will always be a slave to the opinions of others. True freedom, true mental sovereignty, requires the absolute annihilation of your ego. Latetur 8, the law of ego annihilation, the cosmic perspective. The final and perhaps most brutal law of Stoicism is the law of ego annihilation. To become truly unbreakable, you must realize that you are completely, utterly, and magnificently insignificant. In ancient Rome, when a brilliant general won a massive, empire-expanding war, the Senate would grant him a triumph. A triumph was the ultimate display of ego and glory. The general would ride through the streets of Rome in a massive chariot, drawn by 4 white horses. He would be draped in gold and purple robes. Hundreds of thousands of citizens would pack the streets, screaming his name, throwing flowers, and treating him as if he were a living god on earth. It was enough adulation to make any mortal man lose his mind to arrogance. But the Romans understood the toxic, destructive power of the ego. So they instituted a brutal tradition. Behind the conquering general, riding in the very same golden chariot, stood a lowly slave. As the crowd roared, and the general basked in the glory of his own perceived divinity, this slave had one job. For the duration of the parade, the slave would hold a golden crown just above the general's head and repeatedly whisper a single, chilling phrase into his ear. Respis poste, hominem te esse memento mori. Look behind you. Remember you are only a man. Remember you must die. This was the ultimate Stoic reality check. It was a mechanism designed to instantly vaporize the ego before it could take root and destroy the general's soul. No matter how much money you make, no matter how many followers you have, no matter how physically imposing you become, you are just flesh and bone. You are a temporary collection of atoms hurtling through an infinite void on a rock suspended in a sunbeam. Marcus Aurelius used a specific technique to crush his own ego, known today as the view from above. When he felt himself getting agitated by the petty politics of the Senate, or when he felt his own self-importance swelling, he would mentally zoom out. He would imagine his consciousness leaving his body, floating above the palace, above the city of Rome, above the Mediterranean, until he was looking down at the entire earth. From that cosmic vantage point, he would look at human affairs. He saw armies clashing, kings rising and falling, people frantically chasing wealth, and others crying over lost lovers. From the stars, all of this frantic human drama looked like ants fighting over a crumb of bread. He wrote, "Think of substance in its entirety, of which you have the smallest of shares, and of time in its entirety, of which a brief and momentary span has been assigned to you, and of the works of destiny, and how very small is your part in them. When you apply the view from above, your ego cannot survive." And when your ego dies, you become invincible. Think about it. Why do you get angry when someone cuts you off in traffic? Because your ego says, "How dare they do this to me? I am important." Why do you fear failure? Because your ego says, "What will people think of me? My image will be tarnished." Why do you hold on to grudges? Because your ego demands that the universe validate your feelings of being wronged. When you annihilate the ego, all of this fragility vanishes. If someone insults you, it does not land, because there is no ego there to be bruised. You are like water. You cannot be cut. You simply flow around the blade. If you fail publicly, you do not feel shame, because you understand that in 100 years, everyone who witnessed your failure will be dust, and no one will remember your name anyway. Epictetus warned his students about the trap of adopting philosophy just to look smart. He said that a true Stoic is like a sheep. A sheep does not vomit up the grass it has eaten to show the shepherd how much it consumed. It digests the grass internally and produces wool and milk. Do not talk about your mental toughness. Do not brag about your discipline. Do not post about your grind. Digest the brutal laws in silence and produce the results. Let your actions be the only evidence that you have changed. The unbreakable mind is ultimately a quiet mind. It does not need to shout to be heard. It doesn't need validation from the crowd. It does not need the world to be soft, because it has become hard. It operates with a terrifying, silent efficiency. To achieve this final state, you must wage a daily war against your own self-importance. When you accomplish something great, whisper to yourself, "Remember, you are only a man." When you are praised, deflect it. When you are disrespected, ignore it. Become nobody. Become a ghost in the machine of society. Strip away the heavy armor of your ego, and you will find that you can move faster, strike harder, and endure endlessly. A man who needs the world's applause can be controlled by the world's silence. But a man who has killed his ego, who expects nothing, who fears nothing, and who demands nothing but his own internal excellence, that man is a sovereign. That man is a king of his own mind. That man cannot be broken by anything in this world. The forge is hot. The hammer is falling. These 8 brutal Stoic laws will either crush your weakness or they will crush you. The choice is yours. Love your fate. Seek the fire. Build your citadel. Remember your death. Own your life. Eliminate the noise. Execute mercilessly. Annihilate your ego. If this transmission rewired your mind, hit the like button to forge the algorithm. Share this with a brother who needs to wake up, and subscribe to the channel to join the ranks of the mentally unbreakable. Stay stoic. Stay relentless.